Welcome to the Church of Perpetual Life. So glad to have you here, and welcome and happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I hope you're going to enjoy yourselves with your families and your friends next week. And today we're going to celebrate two things here. Tonight we're going to celebrate Thanksgiving as well as our 10th year anniversary as a church. Yes, I agree. Our objective here is to live an unlimited lifespan, and I hope you'll join us in this. Our creed is, we believe that all of life is sacred and that we have been given this one life to make unlimited. We believe in our Creator's divine plan for all of humanity to have infinite lifespans in perfect health and eternal joy, rendering death to be optional. We seek to achieve eternal life by creating a heaven here on earth. And we believe that the only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. I've abbreviated our creed, but we enter each day energized in spirit and empowered by the words of our prophets to live in joy, serving the Creator and all of mankind forever and ever. Let's stay healthy. Let's stay healthy as long as possible, catch longevity, escape velocity, and live an unlimited and healthy life. This church is not a Bible-based church. This is a transhuman church. Although many of our members are Christian or Jewish or Buddhist, some members are atheist or agnostic, but what brings us all together is a common desire, a common goal to live an infinite lifespan, to live a long, long time. How many people are here for the very first time? You're here for the very first time at Perpetual Life. So glad to have you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, there's quite a few, and I see more people in the social hall who are just now coming through. So it's so glad to have you. Welcome to our event, and also we are now Zooming, and we have a Zoom going on as well as a live stream in YouTube. So I welcome everyone who's coming for the first time and our old friends as well. Bill's going to come up and give a few stories about our church and the long time that we've been here, but I'd like to tell you a few stories myself, if I may. Just tell you a few things that you maybe never even heard about, things that we just haven't talked about, some of the strange things that happened here at the church. Now, we were in Hollywood for 6 or 7 years, weren't we, over there on McKinley Street. We had the store there. How many people have been to the church in Hollywood? So many, and you've come back here. I'm so glad that you're here. So we had a number of things happening there. One of the things we had, I was alerted that there was this concern because someone found a couple of chickens with no heads, and they were concerned maybe this was some kind of a curse that someone was giving us. But they called the police, they did an investigation and found out that somebody just left their lunch and didn't come back for it. So it wasn't a curse, and ultimately we have been blessed. I was contacted by a woman. Now, a lot of people ask, how can I leave something in my will for the church? And so I meet with people to discuss these things. And if you'd ever like to do something, leave something in your will, or make a large donation to the church, we're very receptive to that. Be very happy to talk with you about that. But I got a call, and the woman said she's all alone. She has a condominium, and she has about $1 million estate, and she'd like to leave her estate to the church. And how can we arrange that? So I met with her for lunch, and she agreed to meet with me again with our lawyer, the church lawyer, to discuss the matter with her and discuss the details of this. And so then that night she came to our church. She was wearing diamonds and beautiful jewelry, and she proceeded to get a little bit tipsy, and then she had donated a few things to us. Now, the things that she had donated earlier in the day were a few Christmas ornaments, but also some things that were just crazy, like open cans of cat food and really crazy things. And so it was concerning. But that night, she got very upset, very angry. She started shouting terrible things, and we had to escort her out. And as we were going, she said, I'm leaving. Now, she had been picked up and brought to the church, but now we were in Hollywood at the time, and she lived in Hallandale. She was going to walk back to Hallandale, and she's wearing all this jewelry. It was really dangerous for her, and we were very concerned. So I sent one of my assistants out to find her, go find this woman, give her a ride home, don't let her get away. So she found her, and she was kind of hiding in the bushes away. But ultimately, there was no estate, and there was no more from her. She didn't come anymore. Let's see. Yeah, we've had some crazy stories, but we've also have got some great stories too. I know a lot of people have connected here. How many people have made a friend by meeting them here at Church of Perpetual Life? You know, you'll meet people here that will be your friends for life, that can be your family for life. And there have been some great connections. I got a call one time and started talking with a man named Jim Stroll, and he said he wanted to create this festival, which has turned out to be the RAD Festival. I introduced him to Bill. The two of them got together and they created the RAD Festival, and every year 600 to over 1,000 people get together to celebrate life and to have presentations on longevity and wonderful things. And we've lost a few members over the years as well, and that's been tragic. And if you are interested in cryonics, this is the place to learn more about cryonic suspension. We have some people here that would like to talk with people about cryonics. Let me know. I know we've got a whole bunch of people in the back, some famous cryonicists from all over the globe. And next month, we are grateful to have Aaron to be giving a talk here at our Remembrance of the Resurrectables ceremony. And that'll be December the 14th. The second Thursday in December will be when we'll be getting together. So Aaron Drake is here tonight in the audience. Thank you, Aaron. And he'll be here in December to give a great presentation. Tonight we have a wonderful presentation by the founder of our church, and everybody knows, I think, Bill Faloon, and we're going to bring him up in a minute. But after Bill, we have a surprise presentation from a gentleman who just happens to be here in South Florida, and he's going to give us a presentation as well. But let's welcome up the founder of this church, and perhaps one of the most famous immortalists, Mr. Bill Faloon.
Years ago, November 2013, we had our first service, and virtually no one was there, and that was okay. People didn't know about us. But I did talk to a lot of people before conceiving this church, and every one of them said, Bill, you've had some good ideas, some bad ones. This is probably your worst. And I heard enough people tell me that, so that I decided this makes sense. Let's go ahead and do it. And we do have various groups in South Florida with about 25,000 total supporters, but the people who run those groups with me, they didn't want those groups to be educated about the church in the beginning, so it had to grow organically, and it really has. We ran out of space, as you know, in Hollywood and had to move into a bigger headquarters, but it was really interesting in the beginning how few people there were and how fast it grew, how fast the concept grew. So as you can see, our church in Hollywood, we had a lot of people attending some of these services to the point where they weren't able to fit in, and certainly downstairs in our dining hall, we were out of table space. We couldn't fit any more people who wanted to sit down and interact with their fellow immortalists. And that's Neil there with a bunch of people in the background. And I want to, by the way, compliment Neil. If you understand how this church was founded, I had to ask Aubrey de Grey. I was at a scientific conference with Aubrey de Grey, and I said, I've got this concept of forming an immortalist church, but I need someone to run it, someone to set it up, do all the work, and all I want to do is presentations. And Aubrey says, I've met tens of thousands of people with my career, and there's one individual I met who also had that idea of a church, and that was Bill Faloon, and he happened to live in the west coast of Florida. So December 26th of 2012, Neil and I got together, and we formed the concept of the building we needed and what we wanted to do to form a Church of Perpetual Life. So the virtue of me being at a scientific conference with Aubrey de Grey enabled me to learn about Neil Faloon, and we've got this church. And what it really tells you is the virtues of people getting together and interacting. Because how did I start the whole many numbers of groups? I don't talk about commercial entities here, but I've started many, many scientific organizations. And where did those meetings take place? Well, amongst fellow life extensionists, immortalist people who want to live a long time. They get together, they share ideas, they start organizations. Well, they do what we've done. So we've had the 2 churches so far. Now, the one on the left was our first church in Hollywood, which suited us very well in the beginning. You can see the square foot inside, over 7,000 square feet, 31,000 square feet of total space, but there was not enough parking space. And we looked and looked and looked, finding churches in South Florida very difficult. Our current building, that's one picture of it, it's almost double the size inside, and we have 132,000 square feet. So we got plenty of places to park cars, except for nights like this when it's flooding. And there's a lot of water out there. It's the first time I've ever seen the flood occur around here. But anyway, we've got plenty of parking spaces. So we're much bigger. We can hold more people, and we can hold all the cars we want to. And for those who don't know, this is 2 buildings on this piece of property. This is our chapel area and our dining hall. All kind of offices are in this building. But there's also a separate school building, which we've converted into living facilities for people who visit us from out of town and give presentations for different meetings that we have. People don't have to run out to hotels. They can all be here on the premises and work together to find a way to live longer. You've all seen this part of the church, the very first part. This is the way it looked when we first bought it. We thought, wow, what a nice interior. We don't have to do any work for it. Our dining hall and a nice covered parking area for when it's raining, you can park your car. The school area, outdoor picnic tables. We have a lot more here than what you often see when you come to visit us for the chapels. So this is, again, another picture. All that green area is property that we own, about 3 acres. So we can expand, we can build another building here if we wanted to, we could add more paved parking if we need to, so I'm very pleased. And the speakers we've had on this stage, Aubrey de Grey, this is Martine Rothblatt. She is one of the most successful females in the world as far as her success in this world. She is working aggressively on transhumanism and organ transplant programs that will enable her to regrow organs in the laboratory and transplant them back into humans. She's very famous. She founded Sirius Radio and many, many other technical companies. And the last service we had before COVID, we had a woman, Liz Parrish, who's involved in gene therapy research, making incredible advances in that area. So we've had tremendous speakers appear on the podium of this church, and it's an honor because a lot of times you have to pay a lot of money to attend a conference to hear these people talk, and it's free. You get to come to a church at no charge whatsoever and get to hear these speakers. So I'm very happy as to what has happened over the last 10 years. The growth in the membership, people watching us from around the world via the internet. It's a spectacular opportunity to disseminate information. Now bear in mind, 2013 is when this church was founded. I had no idea at that point in time whether it was going to be possible to reverse aging in our lifetime. I did not know that because there wasn't the evidence. 2 years later, George Church appears in the Washington Post talking about his CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology. That was 2 years after this church was founded. You have a Harvard professor talking about curing aging, and the media picking up on other scientists talking about the prospect of human immortality, living forever. So when this church was founded, no one had any idea this could transpire in the immediate future, and it did. Within years of our church founding, all kind of technology was being developed to put animals in reverse as it relates to aging and, well, the prospect of people doing it. So what I'm going to do now is a chronology. I'm going to go backwards from essentially today as it relates to the media coverage that has occurred, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that people get together every month at this church and talk about living forever. And in doing so, the media picks up on it, and they start giving us favorable coverage. The Economist is one of those publications read by over 1 million highly influential people. And what do influential people do? Well, they influence other people into thinking differently. And the entire issue of the September 30th, 2023 issue of The Economist, the whole issue was dedicated to living longer, to the prospect of people living indefinitely. They talked about the serious research going on right now to slow human aging, the fact that some scientists today believe that humans have the capability of living indefinitely, and this is a mainstream publication. It's very widespread amongst people who want to learn something, well, something new, something different. And, well, young blood. We talked about that early in this church's history. When you transfer young plasma, young blood into old animals, the old animals grow younger. They're talking about it a couple weeks ago in The Economist. And decrepit cells, well, those are senescent cells. You purge your body of senescent cells, you may live a lot longer. You may not succumb to the degenerative diseases that you're in store for. And fighting aging, of course, is going to require cellular reprogramming, and that science is advancing at an astronomical rate. Yamanaka and other transcription factors are putting aging in reverse in cells and in live animals, as I'm going to talk about. And we all know the less we eat, the longer we get to live. Calorie restriction, talked about in The Economist in a major way. And, well, just about 10, 12 days ago, the world's largest bank, Chase Manhattan, they sent out a private invitation to their high-end wealth management clients. I guess they were tired of losing clients who prematurely died. So they had a special private webinar. They invited me to attend it, and I had one of our people who work for me attend it because, frankly, I'm doing too many things. And anyway, the purpose of this was to educate their client base on what they could do to live longer, where the research was as it related to super longevity. They had a speaker from the world-famous Buck Institute and other prestigious speakers talking about what we can do to live longer, what lifestyle changes you can make to not prematurely die. Now, a lot of what they talked about, we all know. Avoid processed foods, especially ultra-processed foods, very dangerous. Avoid excess ethanol ingestion, and, of course, tobacco, and physical activity. Engage in lots and lots of healthy activities, and you get to live longer. But here's some of the unique takeaways from this Chase Manhattan, or that's the old name, J.P. Morgan Chase Wealth Management Seminar. And they talked about, since these people were into money, that they start thinking about your body as a depreciating asset as we age. And then they also talked about lifestyle changes, and I'm not certain I agree with this, but one of these prestigious scientists said 93% of our lifespan is determined by our lifestyle choices, by what we do to help our body remain healthy and alive, and only 7% genetics. I do think genetics plays a little bit more of a role than that, but again, these are prestigious scientists talking about what we can do to radically extend our healthy lifespan. And thinking of longevity in investing terms, think of your body as an investment account. And if you get good sleep, and you eat good food, and you pay attention to your health, well, you're going to do a lot better as it relates to your health and longevity. And they talked about if you do most of the best healthy activities, that you can expect to live 15 to 25 years longer. Wow. I don't know if I agree with that 25 years. I do agree with that 15 to 20 years, though. We have to do more, I believe, to reverse aging if we're going to achieve 25 and 35-year lifespan extensions. And I certainly agree with aggressive testing and screening. I hope everyone here is getting an annual melanoma screen, head to toe. Find early-stage lesions that can be removed before you develop metastatic melanoma or other types of skin cancers. So they were advocating for aggressive screening, and of course I think we all agree here and almost everywhere else, the medical system should change more towards preventative medicine. Easiest way to treat a disease is prevent it from occurring in the very first place. So Singapore has opened up a clinic, a healthy aging clinic in a prestigious university hospital, and they're doing research right now to identify ways to live longer, to avoid the burden of age-related disease. And what they're doing is they're aggressively testing in a very rigorous way in clinical trials what is working, what's not working, how well it's working, and they're going to be doing clinical research on new longevity technologies. Well, we reached out to this Singapore group because we let them know there's a lot of experimental therapies that we might want them to test, because Singapore is a very small country, and if they get a group of people together in a clinical trial, they can keep them pretty much corralled into that study. They're not going to disappear as fast as they may do in a large area like South Florida or the United States. So they're going to be able to do some very impressive clinical research at this university hospital in Singapore. We've already made arrangements to work with them, and what they plan to start studying first is rapamycin. That's a drug we've talked about a lot in this church. Rapamycin has extended the lifespan of nearly every species it's ever been tested in. I personally take 6 milligrams of rapamycin every week. This is a drug you take once a week to induce beneficial autophagy, to suppress excess mTOR, and by doing that, well, that's one mechanism, two mechanisms we know by which it may extend healthy lifespan. They're going to test taurine, glycine, MNN. They're going to do this in a very rigorous, meticulous manner. Full-blown clinical trials to see if these types of interventions are delaying pathological aging. And we will be partnering with them on certain projects. And where they're getting some of their money? Well, the Saudi Arabian Evolution Fund. We've talked about that for the last couple of years. The Saudis are committed to spending $1 billion a year to find a way to defeat biological aging, and they're putting up money to scientists in the United States, and they're also helping to fund specific projects at that university hospital in Singapore that's seeking to extend healthy human lifespans. So we've got the whole world coming together right now to figure out a way to defeat aging, or at least slow it down, so people get to live longer, Now, at RadFest, I flew back on September 11th, 2023. I'm at the airport. I looked at the magazine rack, and here I see National Geographic. And the topic, the science of longevity. Science of longevity in National Geographic. And what they were talking about is everything you've heard in this church and at other scientific conferences you might have attended about what impacts aging, what foods you should be eating, which foods you should be avoiding, engaging in exercise. And they talked about a lot of the experimental therapies going on. But these are prestigious mainstream publications, and they're talking about what we have been espousing at this church since 2013, and what I've been espousing professionally since 1977. I set up the first nonprofit group in Florida that sought out physical immortality when I was 22 years of age in 1977, and that group has grown quite a bit since then. So, going back again in time over what transpired in 2023, a world-famous geneticist is predicting with cellular reprogramming, people are going to start living for thousands of years. Now, bear in mind, these are respected scientists that are saying we're on the verge of living a long time, if not forever. And when people like this start talking, the media picks up on it. Popular Mechanics reported on it, a number of other media sources, Wall Street Journal reporting on longevity clinics opening up around this country, big-time money going into these longevity clinics, because people are going to start realizing my health is more important than probably an expensive vacation or an expensive piece of jewelry. I'm going to start investing, as the JP Morgan Chase people were advocating, investing in your health, putting that as your number one priority. And, well, the FDA has approved a study that relates to transhumanism a little bit. A lot of people don't quite understand that concept, but I do. I feel it's going to be our key to immortality. But the good news is that the Elon Musk project to connect our brain with a computer, it's gotten FDA approval, and the clinical trial has opened. Within the last 6 to 7 weeks, they are now recruiting patients to do brain-computer implants. Where that's going to go, how fast it's going to arrive, I don't know, but Elon Musk is predicting a rather rapid transition towards people relying more on the implants in their brain than possibly on their cell phones. A country in Eastern Europe, Montenegro, a little country, they're changing the laws to expedite the development of longevity drugs. In the United States, frankly, it takes way too long. People have to travel offshore sometimes to get a rejuvenation therapy. So this country wants to accelerate it. The Wall Street Journal talking about Ray Kurzweil and his prediction of people living forever, and they're giving us nice coverage from the standpoint of saying it's no longer a scientific impossibility, but they're criticizing about the fact that some people may not want to live forever. And of course, that's up to them. I think a lot of people in this church would like to live forever. I certainly do. And it's nice to see the Wall Street Journal acknowledging that immortality. And here we have the founder of ChatGPT, a man in his 30s, worth a ton of money. He's put up $180 million to find ways to conquer death. And let me emphasize, when this church was founded in 2013, you did not see the mainstream media talking about reversing aging or conquering death. You didn't see it. And now I'm seeing it every couple of days in a media source. The science is there. And the prediction is that there will be a pill coming out of this individual's laboratory. And bear in mind, this individual had a vision to establish an artificial intelligence ChatGPT company that he sold for a ton of money. He's now looking at aging and figuring out, what can I do to reverse that? 5 years, he feels he'll have something available to us, which is why we've got to live another 5 to 10 years to take advantage of these technologies. Peter Attia's book, Outlive, and again, I'm going backwards in chronological order a little bit. This is a fantastic book, by the way, not about immortality or super longevity, but what you can do now to not prematurely die. For example, he talks about something called apolipoprotein B. That's something that is connected to LDL in such a way that if you have high ApoB levels, unfortunately, your risk of having a heart attack is significant. And the good news is you can measure that, and you can lower that with therapies that he talks about in his book, and you can go on the internet and find out all kinds of ways to lower apolipoprotein B, a major factor in coronary atherosclerosis. And his book made it to the #1 New York Times bestseller list in March of 2023. Everything I'm showing you now, 2023. It goes back, of course, these media favorable stories goes back many, many years. Mark Hyman, a doctor we've worked with for many, many years, he wrote a book called Young Forever, and that also went to the #1 top of the New York Times best-selling list. It's amazing how many people now are interested in living a long time, not dying prematurely. This is what we're seeing over and over again in the media. Wall Street Journal talking about telomeres, where if you have short telomeres, your risk of dying of a heart attack is 3 times greater. Shorter telomeres, unfortunately, predispose you to dying of an infection 8 times greater. So you want to do what you can to maintain your telomere length. We don't know yet how to extend them, but we can at least not smoke, exercise, avoid excess alcohol, excess stress. These cause your telomeres to shorten faster. So you don't want to have excessive telomere shortening because it will kill you sooner. This study came out in 2003, February, and they were able to extend maximum lifespan of rats using young plasma. We are now interacting with people who are using healthy young plasma, specific healthy young plasma, to rejuvenate older people. We're doing our due diligence now to see if what they're claiming is really happening, and once we identify that, we'll let people in the church know how they can avail themselves. If it does work, you'll go in a couple times a year for an infusion of young plasma that may have regenerative effects. They're claiming reversals of a lot of neurodegenerative illnesses and other types of problems, and there are mechanistic structures that may be able to validate that. Popular Mechanics talking about the reversal of aging, and the issue they were raising, a lot of other people were, is that the FDA doesn't recognize aging as a disease yet, and that's holding back Big Pharma from spending big money on aging research. Once the FDA changes their mind, and I think they're going to change their mind at some point because more and more people are recognizing aging is a disease, and once they're able to put big money into research, I think there'll be a lot of drugs available to keep people alive longer. Financial Times, huge newspaper. It's like the Wall Street Journal of Europe and Asia, and they talked about January 2nd this year about all the different scientists involved in research right now to find ways to delay and reverse biological aging. And again, I want to emphasize the media, mainstream media, talking about a cure for old age, a cure for death. This did not happen before this church was founded. And when I founded it in 2013, I did not expect all of this publicity was going to occur, but it did. And maybe some of it occurred because we do have a church and people show up. And when people show up, the media pays attention. So sometimes you wonder, should I really get in my car and drive into this church? Well, you being here, you contribute to what we're seeking to accomplish. Because when people show up, like they do at the Rad Fest, 600 to 1,000 people, we've had international media coverage there. We've made headline news in Southern California because we get 1,000 people together who want to live forever. And that causes media attention. And that sparks creativity in the scientific community, and it sparks interest amongst lay people. And Wired Magazine, they talked about a drug potentially available before the end of this year to reverse aging. And one drug they talked about was senolytic type therapies. But what they said is if these therapies are effective in reversing aging, it will represent the greatest discovery since the advent of antibiotics. And you think about what were the leading causes of death in the early 1900s? Well, tuberculosis, diarrhea, pneumonia, often bacterial induced. Well, those diseases are pretty much wiped out in people with healthy immune systems, and we have that opportunity to do that with aging. And National Geographic, again, this was December 28, 2022, talking about researchers seeking to find a cure for aging. This extensive article covered most of what everyone knows in this audience, but again, it's making it into the mainstream. So it's not just people like us learning about what can be done to reverse aging, reverse death, cure death, you reverse death via cryonics, so to speak, or CPR, either way, depending on how fast people get to you. But the media, again, picking up. And this is, I think, the last slide I'm doing on the chronological order of what's happened over the last, 11 months or so. Medscape, this is a website read by conventional doctors, and they're advocating that doctors start treating their patients for age-related problems. Use biomarkers to determine how old a person is, and then intervene to try to reverse or slow their aging process. And they emphasized also, FDA still doesn't recognize aging as a disease, and that's one of the hindrances that's preventing us from moving the technology ahead faster. But again, the mainstream is identifying ways to, well, tell their readers something that they feel the readers are interested in. So the major lifespan discovery of 2023, there's actually two of them, but this one I've talked about, and I'm going to talk about it now again because it relates to us. Yeast cells are very similar to human stem cells. If we slow stem cell aging, we get to live longer. And what they did in this study is they oscillated, or altered is another word for that, the expression of two genes, SIR2 and HAP4. And by alternating the expression of one, silencing the other, they were able to extend lifespan up to 105% when they altered the gene oscillation throughout the yeast cell's lifespan. So they were able to do something that had never been done before as far as extending the yeast cell lifespan. Again, yeast cells are mechanistically similar. They have genetically conserved mechanistic structures that relate to human stem cells. Now, SIR2, silent information regulator 2, that regulates the health of our nucleus in our cells. It regulates DNA repair. Without DNA repair, we die real soon. And the HAP4, HAP stands for hem-activated protein, that promotes mitochondrial biogenesis. Very important, because as we get older, our mitochondria wears out. If we can produce new mitochondria, that in of itself is a new anti-aging approach. So this does both. So the idea with this technology, and this could be translated into human application at some point in the near future, is that you overexpress SIR2 and then you suppress HAP and vice versa. In other words, you swap the expression of these two genes, and in doing so, if you do that throughout the entire lifespan of a yeast cell, they live 105% longer. Fantastic information. It appeared in Science magazine, the most prestigious scientific journal in the world, and the idea is this can be translated into human application. That chart on the right is the lifespan of yeast in purple who don't have the genetic alteration, where they're not swapping the HAP4 and SIR2 gene, and the dots there, the red dashes, are those fortunate yeast cells in which they were able to oscillate or alter the expression of SIR2 and HAP4. They lived on a median of 105% longer, and they also extended maximum lifespan. That's always been a challenge. We know there's some people that can make it up to 120 or so years of age, can't go beyond that. We want to go way beyond that. So technologies that extend maximum lifespan are of particular interest. And I can't wait till this technology becomes available to us so we can enable our stem cells to live a lot longer. Stem cells, as you may know, produce progenitor cells to differentiate into tissues and cells throughout our body. If we could maintain healthy stem cell activity, well, we could potentially live for a very, very long time. So this study, very important. Now, back in 2022, for the first time, they were able to rejuvenate old mice using Yamanaka transcription factors. They were able to take old animals, make their skin look younger, reduce inflammation, reduce the senescent associated secretory phenotype. That's what the senescent cells secrete that promote inflammation, and worst of all, they promote the release of protein-degrading enzymes. Think about that. Enzymes that your own cells produce that degrade your body's proteins. You want to get rid of those senescent cells. Well, what they did is they reprogrammed these mice in a way that they reversed their aging process, but they didn't collect data on lifespan. We don't know if those reprogrammed mice, even though they grew younger, were they living longer? Were they living longer? And then Harvard, they emulated a similar study using Yamanaka transcription factors, and they too were able to reverse aging in mice. They were able to show improvements in epigenetic markers. They were able to see that the mice getting these factors, which help regenerate the cells, well, they were seeing a lot of benefits, but again, no data collected on lifespan. So once again, we're seeing mice grow younger, but they didn't hold out. Well, a third study came out, published January 2023, in which they did pretty much the same thing. They used 3 out of the 4 Yamanaka factors. That's that OSK on the top line there. OSK, 3 out of 4 of the Yamanaka factors. And what they do is they take those Yamanaka factors and they encode them into an adeno-associated virus. It's pretty much an innocuous virus. And then they infect the animals with that virus, and the virus then releases or impregnates pretty much the cells with these Yamanaka factors, and they want to be able to turn Yamanaka factor activity on and off. And they do that with doxycycline. They put doxycycline in their drinking water, and the Yamanaka factors are expressing themselves. And when they want to turn them off, they remove the doxycycline. So you don't want the Yamanaka factors turned on all the time, but what the research indicates is the longer you express Yamanaka factors, the better results you get. But this third study that reversed aging in live animals, it resulted in epigenetic age markers improving. It results in youthful functionality being restored to the entire animal, but best of yet, it extended the remaining lifespan by 109%. And that is beyond impressive, because most of us in this room, because I don't see any children here, I don't see any, we all need to extend our remaining lifespan. A discovery in which something is given to a very young animal and it lives 10 times longer, well, if it doesn't apply to older people, it doesn't apply to us. So we're looking to research in which you can extend remaining lifespan. And what this would equate to as it relates to people, if you're, let's say, 77 years of age, you're supposed to live another 10 years maybe if you're in a good state of health, so you make it to 87. If you extend remaining lifespan 109%, you get to live to be around age 98. And it's not just the extra 10 years. You are then living in an era where age reversal is likely to be routine. So instead of being, well, dead, you're alive, and you take advantage of this technology. So I'm going to conclude with something that we can't do enough of as it relates to reinforcing healthy habits. Now, this study published in 2022, it talked about adding 10 to 13 years of life to your lifespan there. Men, by the way, always benefit more when they start eating healthier, because men tend to eat less healthy than women. But in this study, if you started an optimized diet at age 20, you get to live 10 to 13 years longer. Now, those green arrows are the healthy foods you should eat more of. The red arrows pointed down are what you should eat less of or avoid altogether. And it shouldn't surprise you, the red meat, the processed foods, sweetened drinks, they shorten lifespan. And the healthy vegetables, well, they enable you to live longer. And if you are, unfortunately, 60 when you start this, you still buy yourself a lot of time. That 8 to 8.8 years of extra life, that could buy you enough extra life to be in that era when people get to live for long periods of time. And even if you're age 80, you still buy extra time by switching to an optimized diet. More legumes, nuts, whole grains, fish, fruit, vegetables. We know that already, but what I'm doing here is reinforcing healthy eating habits. It really helps. It helps me, frankly, just preparing these slides. I wind up eating healthier because I'm working on my computer and doing this, and I'm realizing I'm not going to eat that bad stuff. It's going to kill me. Whereas the good stuff gives you a lot more added lifespan. So this concludes my talk. Again, we've been here 10 years, and everyone thought this was something that would never take off. And what it's done is generated us international publicity, as you saw in that little opening when we played the song. It's generated us a lot of credibility, and it's generated a lot of thought processes in people's minds. Because if they think no one's interested in living longer, if no one is interested in age reversal, well, then we won't do anything about it. But our church has made it loud and clear. We've got a lot of people who are dedicated to making this a reality. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. And I'd like to open for questions and answers if we could, Bill. Diane.
After 8 years of coming here, being part of this, I want to know just what you just said. What's the bad thing that you would have eaten, and how long ago did you eat it? I want to know what you said. I don't want to eat bad things. What do you eat?
Processed foods.
No. What did you cheat with? You didn't.
I've cheated all the time. I mean, I hate myself for it. But I cheat less and less. The older I get, I cheat less. No, I've eaten fast food. I mean, and I hate myself for it. Yeah, I eat less and less of it, more and more of the good. The older I get, the more terrified I get about the bad food.
Any practitioners currently using some of the methods you're discussing? Some of the medications and different elements? I didn't write them down.
A lot of people are interested in using Yamanaka factors right now. We don't think that's safe. But what we're investigating, I'm going to present this over the next couple months. I'm interacting with some scientists right now, and when I have these 2 or 3 hour conference calls with them, I think I'm 10 years in the future, because they're talking about doing interventions right now, not only in just older people, on themselves. These are scientists and medical doctors who are self-experimenting with certain drug combinations to emulate what Yamanaka transcription factors are doing. And our plan right now is to do some aggressive work on pigs, and this is beneficial work, by the way. Take very old pigs, give them Yamanaka factors, make sure it's safe, and see if we can reverse aging in pigs, move on to primates, and then move on to people. But we've got some credentialed medical doctors right now who said, I'm not going to wait for that. I will try it myself, and if I have to be a John Hunter or whatever, he's a famous person who, well, it's kind of gross, but I'll just tell you what he did. He intentionally injected, or he infected himself with gonorrhea, intentionally, because he needed to know how that disease progressed. And the only way for him to know it was to experience it. And by infecting himself with gonorrhea, he accidentally also infected himself with syphilis. He died a horrible death. But he's also a hero. We should have a monument here for what he did. Because back in his era, they didn't know bacteria existed. They knew nothing about this disease except it slowly killed people. So this medical doctor intentionally infected himself with a horrible disease just so he could keep notes about how he was progressing, how he was dying. So these are heroes. I mean, they're putting themselves on the front lines to save humanity. But we may have some people doing that very soon with Yamanaka factors, hopefully not having adverse outcomes.
Bill, I have a question for Max.
Yeah, great presentation, Bill. I just want to urge a little bit of skepticism about one thing, because it always turns up on things about diet. The red meat appears as a bad thing. I think there's actually strong evidence of a lot of capture of the journals and the medical schools over decades. And I think actually unprocessed red meat, I think, is actually good stuff. If you look at the nutritional profile of beef, it's amazingly dense with nutrients. And I think there's actually a lot of very dubious science, obviously not something we could resolve right now. But I would just suggest that people, when they see that, kind of look further in the literature, because it's actually very controversial.
As it relates to eating red meat, the preponderance of the data shows that red meat is going to increase your cancer risk, dementia risk. It's not the best thing for us to eat for healthy longevity. Remember, if you're just going to live to the age of 30 to 40, eat plenty of meat. No big deal. You don't have any problems at all. But if you want to live longer, and there's a lot of data on this, you try to minimize your intake of it. And let me say, I had a PSA elevation in year 2002, about 1.4. And then I just decided myself that big steak, which I used to love, I'm just going to stop doing that. And my PSA is like 0.5 right now. I made some other changes. It's something where you can always, there's enough published research out there, you can find a study to support almost any position. But I'd like to think our group looks at all of the data, and all the data, the preponderance of it is more of a vegetable diet. Now, what you're missing, by the way, when you don't eat red meat, you're missing taurine. That's an amino acid that has potential super longevity benefits. If you eat meat, you're getting about 200 milligrams a day, which is still inadequate. If you're a vegan, you're only getting 17 milligrams. You need a couple grams. So vitamin B12 and taurine and carnosine, there are beneficial nutrients in red meat that you miss out on if you're a strict vegan or vegetarian. You can supplement with those nutrients. And ideally, you're going to make sure you get some of the benefits that the red meat has in a different way than putting lots of red meat in your body. So for me, I have red meat maybe 3 times a year. I enjoy it. I'd like to do it every night, but I don't want to develop prostate and other kind of malignancies. I don't want my arteries to occlude prematurely. So I'm able to eat fish and vegetables and just kind of stay away from it as much as I'm able to. So we can all do it a little bit, by the way, but going home every night and charbroiling a steak, some people do that. You're asking to die prematurely based on what I've ascertained from a lot of published studies.
Question first from the online. Bill, we have a question from someone asking, where can they get rapamycin? Where would you recommend?
All people buying it offshore right now. Just go into Google and type in rapamycin and offshore pharmacy. You'll find plenty of them. We've imported a lot of it for personal use. We test it. It's all been good so far. And we also test it in our blood, because rapamycin is something you just can't put into a tablet. It's going to be made in a bioavailable form. And so far, all of the rapamycin that we've tested, you take your 6 milligrams and the next day get your blood drawn. And we see the rapamycin in our bloodstream. So in the United States, it's cost prohibitive. In the offshore, it's very reasonable. So just type in rapamycin and offshore pharmacy, and you'll see a whole list of companies selling it for a low amount of money. And so far, everything we've looked at looks perfect. Same as what you buy in the United States for a ton of money.
Yeah, Bill, another great presentation, as you always do. You know who I am. You know my background. And I just want to say one thing, because of my degrees in being a scientist, study health, nutrition, and study the human body. There's one thing that most people don't talk about, and you did mention it, one word, is stress. What stress can do to a human being. So I just want you to...
Yes, we can't overemphasize the adverse impact of stress. I don't know how many of you have an at-home blood pressure monitor. I advocate you all get one, by the way. I test my blood pressure a couple times a day. When there's a stressful day, even though I'm taking an antihypertensive drug, blood pressure goes up. And that's just one negative aspect of stress. Cortisol is being released. All kind of damage occurs. So, yeah, we cannot overemphasize the adverse impact of stress, the adverse impact of insufficient sleep. I mean, there's so much that we could talk about, but this presentation pretty much is just talking about technologies to reverse aging and also what people are doing. I'm glad I mentioned it once, though, Don, so good. And for some of us, if we're working, it's hard to avoid stress some days. If you're going to be successful, you have to endure some stress.
I have a question from Iris. Bill?
Great presentation. It's my first time here, but I really enjoyed it. My question was similar to the one they asked about rapamycin. How often are you taking it? And
You only take it once a week.
Once a
If you
week.
took it every day, you might have some adverse effects. But you take it once a week in a high dose, it builds up in your blood real quick, it shuts down excess mTOR, turns on beneficial autophagy, which is internal cellular housekeeping. So you get that benefit for a couple days, and then it's gone. And then you just go back to normal. Then the next week, 6 milligrams of rapamycin, boost it again, clear out the debris inside your cells, turn down excess mTOR. So once a week, 6 milligrams is what most people are currently taking. Now that dose may be incorrect. We might need to be taking 10 milligrams, maybe 20, but we're trying to be safe. So 5 to 6 milligrams once a week. Thousands of people we know are doing it. no adverse effects being reported that are significant. And some people are going to start experimenting with higher doses because in reality, some of the animal studies used much higher human equivalent dosing. But we can't risk a side effect. So we think being conservative with 6 milligrams a week is safe and probably effective.
What would be some of the side effects?
Side effects would be excess immune suppression. This is given to organ transplant patients to suppress their immune function. And they take it every day because they need it every day. For us, though, we can have a little bit of immune suppression for a day or two, get all those beneficial effects, and then it's out of our body and everything goes back to normal. It actually benefits immune function when taken in the proper way, at least according to a few studies. And more research is going on. And when that study from the university in Singapore comes out, we're going to really know how well rapamycin works, because that will be a tightly controlled clinical trial where they're going to be meticulously measuring all kinds of measures of aging, various blood tests, urine tests, just frailty. Are these people doing better or worse on rapamycin? So we'll know a lot more perhaps at the end of 2024.
Question from Spain. Well, what do you think about Ray Kurzweil's forecasting to reach a longevity escape velocity by 2029, 2030?
Well, I certainly wish it will happen. I hope it will happen. I think that science is moving ahead at a pace where it could happen. We just need one major advance in which we can show significant reversal of aging in humans. And then I think there'll be a groundswell of research. It'll be as fast as, well, you look at the first computers that came out, they were pretty bad. But once they started showing them working, the technology advanced real fast. And with AI and other technologies, we can potentially reverse aging by that 2029, 2030 period, or at least control it enough.
Thanks, Bill. A question here from Sky.
I want to ask about some of the technologies that are available, and a lot of people in the longevity area have been using them. Some stuff like metformin, for example, which helps to bring down and control your blood sugar, originally for type 2 diabetes, but now it's being prescribed off-label by a lot of doctors and pretty widely accepted as, it's the only prescription drug I've seen that has multiple studies. It says, it's going to extend your lifespan. And so just practical stuff like that. An alternative, if you can't get metformin, I've heard, is berberine as a supplement. It also helps to help control your blood sugar. And then the second piece is also asking about, you said anti-senolytics, right? Like, how do you get rid of the senescent cells? I don't know if there's anything that you've been working with. I'd love to hear about
there's
that.
a couple new drugs that we're investigating now as senolytics. The classic way of doing it is a chemotherapy drug called dasatinib. And you do this maybe once a month, and you take a dose of about 100 milligrams of dasatinib. And if you don't get sick the first day, just do it the second day. Most people don't feel a side effect. You combine dasatinib with quercetin. That's the original way that senolytics have been tested and shown remarkable results. So that's how they deal with senescent cells pharmaceutically. And there's some new pharmaceuticals that have an off-label use like metformin does, and they may more effectively reduce senescent cells. As soon as we validate that research, it'll be up on the screen, and we'll be recommending that to the church members. And that too will be available hopefully offshore, so it'll be affordable. And metformin, yes, I've been taking that for the last 23 years. I take 850 milligrams twice a day, and I feel that's helped me in many, many ways.
I have a question back here from Devin. Let me get over here.
Oh, as it relates to meat consumption, I think that's methionine restriction, isn't that right? If you're avoiding meat for life extension?
Yeah, it's restricting methionine, and that's a potential anti-aging mechanism. There's been animal research in which they take methionine out of the diet and the animals live longer, but I think it's more than that. The way food is prepared, you burn meat and it turns into a glycation end products that you ingest, and then your proteins become glycosylated. So unfortunately, I'm just looking at epidemiological data. People eat lots of red meat, they've got more cancers, they get more heart disease, more dementia. It's just what we know right now. And look, I love meat. I wish I could eat it every night, but I also love life a little bit. So I'm willing to give up 10 minutes of eating good food and maybe live a lot longer.
Question over here from Vincent.
Have you implemented any strategies to prevent sarcopenia related to aging?
Yeah, that's a major problem. When we eat less, we risk sarcopenia, loss of muscle mass, increased risk of frailty, fractures, falls. So you've got to be really careful. You've got to engage in weight-bearing exercise, engage in physical activity. And what some people do is they'll not take metformin and rapamycin for a couple months out of the year to help rebuild muscle mass, rebuild some bone density. So there's some different theories out there as to how you should turn on maybe the beneficial effects that these drugs induce, and maybe turn it off temporarily to allow some of your tissues to regenerate. It's a good question, and it's one we debate a lot in the life exchanging community.
Question from Larry.
Well, more of an expression. I just wanted to thank you for all the work that you've done for such a long time since I've known you. And I just want to say that I think that but part of the secret that you have, if you don't mind me giving away your secrets, of extending yourself is extending the quality of your life, and that automatically extends the quantity. And I think part of your extending the quality is you're helping others, which helps you, and helping yourself, which helps others. So thank you.
Yeah, no question. I think I have the most fulfilling job, or one of the most fulfilling jobs. I get to help people almost every day, one way or another, through my articles, through my talks. So yeah, it is a very fulfilling way of waking up every morning and going to bed at night. So thank you, Larry, and yes, absolutely.
Next question from Pat.
Yes, doesn't life extension have a supplement that helps senescent cell activity be reduced?
There are nutrient formulations out there that can potentially induce a lot of senolysis, removing senescent cells. Black tea, theaflavins, quercetin, that's used in combination with dasatinib. So there are ways to try to do it nutritionally, and I'm doing a lot of that myself right now, because the theaflavins have very many mechanistic similarities to dasatinib. One of those benefits, by the way, is BCL2 inhibition. That stands for B-cell lymphoma inhibition, and that's a major risk factor as you grow older, lymphoma. So there are nutrients that may emulate dasatinib. What I try to talk about here at the church, though, are drugs that have been shown in laboratory studies to work, and I'm hoping to introduce a new drug next couple months that may be safer than dasatinib and work better. And if that drug is introduced, people may want to start using that.
Yeah, hi Bill, Dave Feldman from Pompano Beach. Thanks again, great presentation. But I always have tons of questions to ask you, especially after you're done speaking. But do you have do you publish a list of recommended vitamins and the doses of those vitamins? Like vitamin C is a favorite of mine. Since I started taking it, no colds or anything. For
I don't really have a published list of that because there's so much diversity as it relates to what people feel is optimal. So typically, you try to take the basics, you add on what you're able to do, both cost-wise and time-wise and that sort of thing. But I don't think anyone knows what the true optimal dose is. But we've been recommending supplements now for 40 plus years. We don't see adverse effects from a wide range of doses. Well, again, that's debatable with vitamin C. I think everyone should be taking 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day. There's some people who are taking 10,000 milligrams a day. I'm probably taking on average 4,000, 5,000 milligrams a day on average. But again, there's not enough science to definitively say that. The good news with some of the drugs is we actually have some science that looks at dosing, and we can say this is what you should do because it works so well either in an animal model or even some human trials. I appreciate your question. It needs to be answered. I'm hoping the people in Singapore give us some of those answers because they're going to be studying supplements aggressively at different doses and seeing how well they really work. So that's what gets me excited about the near term.
Bill, I have a question from online, and they're asking, what do you recommend for someone with ALS?
Well, we're hearing some good results, and we haven't confirmed that yet, with young plasma, healthy young plasma. Of course, people are using stem cells in some situations, and we're hearing anecdotal feedback of some improvement, but we need to validate that. And I have a crew of people who does that full time. They travel around the world, go to stem cell clinics, go to young plasma centers, and they look for records. They look for validation to see, are there ways to really help these people with ALS put in reverse a little bit this horrible disease that only goes in one direction. So we're hearing some favorable anecdotes, but until we validate it ourselves, we don't want to be recommending it. But if someone has ALS, hang in there. There may be some hope coming along in the next couple months.
A question over here for you, Bill.
Hi, great speaker. You're very knowledgeable. I'd like to ask you if you know about, is there a possibility that cortisol, the effects that it has on anybody that goes through any life event that causes stress, whether it's medical or whatever the reason being for how cortisol is, the release of cortisol, is it possible to reverse the effects cortisol has on the brain? Do you know?
There may be some ways to do it if you want to reduce the cortisol release. Vitamin C, aspirin even, it can reduce some of the cortisol release. There may be some other nutrients that help do that. As far as protecting your brain against that, I would just look at the typical nutrients that help protect brain function. You know, some of the plant extracts, the blueberry, pomegranate, so some of the nutrients that are good for neurological structure and or function. Ashwagandha is really a nice way of helping to protect against the impact of stress, maybe lower cortisol levels. So there are some ways to help do that. You can probably pretty much go on Google and type in, cortisol reduction and dietary supplement. You might find a whole list of them out there. I don't talk about supplements specifically, but those are some hints.
I have a question over here.
Hi, thank you. I thought that eating eggs, it was a good idea, but I saw in the list not to eat egg.
Yeah, that's what that study found. Now, some studies show eggs don't affect longevity at all. Others, I've read studies showing increased cancer risk with people who eat a lot of eggs. I've seen that data. But in that particular study, eggs were shown to have one, red arrow down, which means you shouldn't eat a lot of eggs. That's pretty much what that's telling you, based on that analysis. But there's other studies showing the eggs won't hurt you at all. So that's more controversial, the egg debate, as opposed to processed foods. I mean, I think we all maybe agree eating a lot of processed foods is very bad for us, and the data continues to come out. New study came out today. People eat lots of ultra-processed foods. Their dementia risk goes up. So at least we can agree on avoiding excess processed food intake. Eggs, you could probably have a debate on.
A question back here from George.
Hi, Bill. Congratulations on your 10 years.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to ask a question that's very quizzical about this anti-aging and longevity. But if you start a protocol that they find that works, you start at 20 years old, do you stop aging at 20 and you live for 1,000 years at 20? I mean, because aging starts as soon as you're born, basically. So when do you stop aging, and if you're going to extend it? What age do you become 1,000 years old at? At 20, at 30, at 40, 50? I mean, I don't understand. Nobody talks about that particular timeline.
Well, let me try to explain it to you maybe a way we can all relate to. From age 0 to age 30 or 40, we typically remain in a fairly good state of health. There's aberrations out there as people get cancer at an early age and die, but for the most part, we get born and we just mature, and every day we're pretty much in good shape. And then after 30, after 40, problems start to arise. Well, what if we can reprogram your cells, which is being worked on right now with Yamanaka transcription factors and other methods to reverse aging by reprogramming our cells? What if you remained biologically age 25 forever? You would be biologically 25. Chronologically, you'd have your birthdays. You'd be 150, 200, 250, but your cells remain at age 25. So you can see you basically aren't aging at that point. You are chronologically, but biologically you're remaining young. So that's our objective. Put you into a younger state, keep you in a younger state, because for most of us, when we were younger, problems just weren't there. And with the technology improving the way it is, if you develop problems, they'll probably be able to cure them.
Bill, I have first a question online, and this is there a gram per body weight or activity for rapamycin?
The mechanisms of action of rapamycin, we know it suppresses excess mTOR. That's the mammalian or mechanistic target of rapamycin. And most of us, because we overeat, we're sedentary. Most of us, we have excess mTOR1. And what that does is accelerate aging. It makes us more vulnerable to cancer. It can create all kind of havoc in our aging bodies. We want to suppress mTOR. Now, one way of doing that is calorie restriction. Another way of doing it is intermittent fasting. If you can eat only maybe 8 hours most days and not eat 16 to 18 hours, fast for 16 to 18 hours and only eat in a limited window, you'll benefit in some similar ways as rapamycin enables you to benefit. But as it relates to the drug itself, rapamycin, there's all this data when they feed it to animals, whether they restrict their eating or not, the animals get to live longer and they live healthier. So we're trying to emulate that data. And so far, lots of people taking rapamycin, not hearing of any adverse effects. I've been on it for about 9 months right now. I don't have any adverse effects from it, and most of the people I talk to don't have adverse effects.
Here's a question.
Hi, my name is L'Oreal. Congratulations on 10 years. Also, I wanted to say to you, my mother is 79 and has severe deteriorating Parkinson's disease. Is there anything that you could suggest for that? It's heart-wrenching to watch this.
Well, we're hearing some interesting anecdotal data on healthy young plasma. That's a potential. It could be exosomes from stem cells properly administered. Exosomes, by being secreted by stem cells, they help regenerate our mesenchymal cells. All of the cells in our body help to be regenerated if we have healthy stem cell function. So what we're looking at now for neurodegenerative diseases, be it early stage Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all kinds of neurological conditions, it may be in healthy young plasma. I may know in the next month or two if it's really working. Our investigators are at different places right now as we speak, interviewing people who have these young plasma facilities, and they're claiming they're getting results. What we want to see is baseline and follow-up. We want to call these people who underwent young plasma infusions to see, are they really doing better over an extended period of time? And it does require you come in every 3 or 4 months or more frequently to get more young plasma. It's not like one time does it. But by doing that, you may start to regenerate neurological function. And Parkinson's is one that they've seen more consistent called GCSF, granulocyte colony stimulating factor. It's given to cancer patients with chemotherapy. And Dr. Maharaj has been doing that up in Boynton Beach now for a number of years. He's been giving Parkinson's patients the GCSF drug, and that causes the release of stem cells from your bone marrow that travel into your brain and help regenerate neurological function. I've undergone that treatment. I feel it's improved my cognitive function after I took it, and it improved a number of other health parameters. Now, when Dr. Maharaj told me that, I don't always want to believe a single. Another neurologist, Juan Sanchez Ramos, he is in Tampa, Florida, and he had been using it, so I called him up. I know a lot of these doctors, so I'm able to get them on the phone, and I'm saying, Dr. Maharaj says his GCSF protocol is reversing Parkinson's. And Juan Sanchez Ramos, who doesn't even know Maharaj that well, said, oh yeah, we do that. It helps. It helps these people get better. So GCSF, Dr. Maharaj up there in Boynton Beach, but I didn't just want 2 doctors. I called Dr. Steenblock in Southern California, a true pioneer, by the way, as it relates to aging and Dr. Steenblock, he also uses the GCSF, and I asked him, I said, well, Dr. Maharaj and Dr. Juan Sanchez Ramos, they're saying they're getting results in Parkinson's. What are you doing? He said, oh yeah, I've seen results. I prescribe it all the time. So we've got 3 independent doctors who don't know each other, have no financial connection, independently cooperating to me, the GCSF, which is available right now. And this would be something where you would put the patient on the GCSF for 7 days, and then 7 days off, then maybe another 7 days, and 7 days off. Measure the classical ways of signs of Parkinson's, see if there's improvement on a consistent level. So that's one drug available now, and then young plasma might be in addition to the GCSF or in lieu of.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big hand for Mr. Bill Faloon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to just quickly say a word about some of the people that are working tonight, my assistants. We have Janice and Shri, who have been helping me for quite a bit. Thank you for your help. And we also have our crew, Douglas Baldwin, who's behind the glass, our technical director and his team. Tonight on camera we have Amy Baum and Warren Johnson here, and we also have, from time to time you may see Fabio working here or Desire Vanderpool. We're very happy to have our whole crew, a great crew. Also like to point out our board of directors. We originally had Greg Strom as our president. Now it's Richard Daly. Bill Faloon is our vice president. Ben Best over here, our secretary treasurer, and on the board also Jeff Shaw, Andrew Michael, Charlie Kem, and Nicholas Vandermeulen. So we're very happy to have a good and active group there helping us. I'd like to now tell you a little bit about a friend of mine, a gentleman I met in San Francisco at Hank Pellicier's event. He had a conference, and that was the first time that I met Max. He is the past CEO at Alcor, and also he's the founder of Extropy Institute, a world-famous transhumanist who happened to be here in South Florida. And just only yesterday, I asked him if he could speak today, and it's all come together. So let's bring up Max Moore.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here. I'm actually, since I didn't really have planning time, what I'm going to do is combine a previous presentation I've given that I think will be new to 95% of the people here anyway. And then at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit separately about the role of resistance exercise, which I think gets neglected a little bit. So I want to talk about cryonics as plan A for life extension. So we've heard quite a few possibilities for life extending treatments. Cryonics, people often treat this as plan B, a backup plan. They say, well, my goal is not to die in the first place. I want to take all these anti-aging treatments, and I'm not going to worry too much about cryonics. My view is that actually you should put cryonics first, and that's what I'm going to explain. First of all, just to give you an idea, how many people here are pretty familiar with the idea of cryonics? Okay. So the way I like to think about cryonics, or biostasis, which is a more general term, which includes cryonics is using very cold temperatures to preserve tissues. There are other possible ways of doing that. So biostasis is kind of a broader term that includes that. But when you talk about cryonics or biostasis, it's really an extension of emergency medicine. So, and to understand, well, let me just say something about that. If you go back, say 60 years or so, actually before 1960, if someone here were to suddenly go, stop breathing, their heart stopped beating, we would just have checked them. No heartbeat, no respiration, they're dead. That was it. We gave up, we quit. Today, of course, we don't do that. We think that the person is not really dead. They're actually clinically dead, but that's not very meaningful. We think what we need to do is to restart their life processes. So we do CPR, defibrillation, various other things we can do. Now, at some point, you're going to hit the limits of today's medicine, right? It's improved a lot since 1960, and certainly since the days of bloodletting and leeches, although they do actually have their uses still. So obviously, technology will continue to improve, but today does have its limits. There are some things we can't fix. You're just too far gone. So the conservative thing, and it might sound odd to use the word conservative in this context, because we're talking about an idea that's considered very radical, but the conservative thing literally is to conserve the individual. Instead of burying them or burning them, why not put them in a condition where you've essentially pressed the pause button on the dying process? You stop them from dying. Because death is not a sudden event, and that's really the three core ideas here to understand the basis for cryonics. First of all, true, final, irreversible death is not the same thing as clinical death or legal death or even biological death. So clinical death, as I said, is really just your heart stopped beating, respiration stopped. That we can fix in many cases. In fact, we can fix that in some cases up to an hour or so of clinical death, which might sound pretty incredible, but there are people who've been clinically dead for up to an hour and they've been restarted with the brain intact. They tend to be people who fall into very cold water. They're often children because of the larger surface area to volume ratio, so they cool more quickly. So the critical thing here is the metabolism is slowing down, and that's slowing down all the processes that cause the damage in the dying process. So basically we're wanting, when we do cryonics, people say, well, you're freezing dead people, but no, that's not really true because they're not really dead in the important sense. So clinical death is one thing. Legal death is really just kind of an agreement in society that we're going to call this person dead for legal purposes. So people who go missing may be declared legally dead, for instance, even if they're actually still alive and are going to come back like they do on Dallas and some of the soap operas after a couple of seasons. Now, biological death is really when the cells have stopped functioning beyond the point that you can get them functioning again. That still isn't true death in the view of a cryonicist, because what matters to us is that we preserve the brain structure, maybe the whole body, but most importantly, the brain structure that encodes your memory and your personality. And so long as we've done that, you're not gone. You're basically in a state where things just aren't changing. You're in a state of stasis, or we call it biostasis. So you're not truly dead, because in principle, if there is some method with future technology, much more advanced than our own, that can reverse cancer, heart disease, the aging process itself, which we're all expecting to happen at some point, then if you stop the dying process early on and not so much damage is done, hopefully we can bring you back to life. We can repair you and revive you. So even on what's considered biological death, or even brain death, which is actually a more complex idea than it sounds, is not the same as true death. Secondly, deep cold can halt the dissolution of biological systems and enable us to pause the dying process. Now, by deep cold, we're not talking about your freezer at home, which is about -20. That's not very cold. That'll keep things fresh for a few weeks or months. We're talking about storing biological tissues at -320 Fahrenheit, or -196 Celsius for Europeans here. That's really, really cold. That's actually a little colder than we need to go. But the point is, at that temperature, there's actually nothing happening. There's no metabolism whatsoever. There's maybe some cosmic rays zipping through, dislodging the molecule occasionally, but there's basically nothing happening. So once we've got you cryopreserved, we can potentially wait for 50 years, 100 years, even longer if necessary, to develop the technologies for repair and revival. So we understand that death is not what it maybe seems. It's actually a gradual process we can stop. Cold can halt that process. And then thirdly, in the future, I don't think it's a terrible radical statement to say that we'll have more advanced cell repair methods and ways of curing diseases and aging that we can't fix today. So that's really kind of the core of what's really kind of a complicated idea. Well, I'm going to skim through this pretty quickly in parts because I want to get to my other presentation too. And I've already sort of covered this. So really the basic idea is death is a process. It's not an event. Kind of skip over this as to what cryogenic temperatures are. If you want to understand a bit more how we might repair people, do biological repair in the future, I could recommend this 800-page book that goes into enormous detail as to how you might repair cryonics patients. It's an amazing book, but probably a little bit too heavy for most people to tackle. And for that reason, I'm actually writing a book on cryonics, which will hopefully have a chapter where I can compress 800 pages of Robert's ideas into a chapter that's more readable. I'd also recommend reading a great book by Eric Drexler called Engines of Creation from 1986. It's still a very excellent book today. And he has a chapter in there on cryopreservation and on using nanomachines to do cellular repair and revive people. You'll probably find it a bit more accessible than Robert's book, but Robert goes into incredible detail in this one. So, okay, let's get to this plan A idea. Now, I think the idea of longevity escape velocity was mentioned. The basic idea of longevity escape velocity is we hope to get new treatments that will slow the aging process. It probably won't happen all at once, right? So maybe we'll get a treatment that saves you 1 month per year. So you're losing 11 months per year. Then maybe 3 months per year, and then 6 months per year, then 9 months per year. So you're only aging at a quarter of the rate. And eventually we get to the point, longevity escape velocity, where you basically stop aging. And then we go beyond that, we actually reverse the aging process. So it's kind of like the escape velocity into space. You have to reach a certain velocity to get out of the Earth's gravity well. The idea is we reach that point, we accelerate the improvements in anti-aging so that at some point you stop aging and start to go into reverse. But when is that going to happen? That's the big question, especially for those of us who aren't so young. Right? That's getting a more urgent question for me. I'm 2 months away from my 60th birthday now, and I'm starting to get a little uncomfortable because I've been watching this space for a long, long time. I'll talk more about that. So I won't go too much into that, but it's interesting if you look at the stats globally, lifespans have been increasing for many decades now. In fact, they're increasing at quite an impressive rate, something like 3 months per year, which is kind of remarkable. So people are living a lot longer. A great website, by the way, Our World in Data, I recommend for all kinds of information. And they've got some great charts there. You can see how even in the poorest countries, lifespans have been extending quite a lot. And it's not all due to child mortality. Maybe half of that's due to lower child mortality. It's also due to people living longer and sometimes healthier, though not necessarily. Our World in Data. It's a fantastic site for all kinds of information, very graphical, easy to understand. Now, recently in the United States, we have actually gone into reverse, sadly. Not only is lifespan not getting longer, it's actually gotten shorter, before COVID too. I think this is about 2010 or a little earlier, it actually stopped growing and it's been shrinking. There are some reasons, I think, why we're lagging behind Europe. I don't need to go into all those details now. I do think it's going to pick up again. I saw a publication that looked at the early data, and again, it's early data, it's not verified, but it looks like in the first 6 months of this year, lifespans may have increased by 1.07 years. So actually, we're gaining back some of the few years that we've lost, which is to be expected when we're recovering from a pandemic. But I'm issuing a little bit of caution here. I'm very optimistic. Again, like Bill, I'm really hoping we're going to beat this problem tomorrow, but we're not really sure. And having been involved in this for more than 40 years now, I've seen all these different theories of aging come and go. And I'm not going to read these through. That's just to give you an idea that there are an awful lot of these theories of aging. So we're not even really sure what causes aging. Is it one thing? Is it a whole bunch of things? There are competing theories. Some, like in 2015, for instance, two of the names actually Bill mentioned in his talk, I had organized a sort of debate session between 3 leading anti-aging researchers. One of them was Aubrey de Grey, who was mentioned, who believes in a sort of a 7-part process, 7 kinds of damage accumulating to cause aging. One was Josh Mitteldorf, who thinks aging is essentially a programmed problem, and Michael Rose, who's an evolutionary biologist who takes a different perspective. So they completely disagreed on the basic framework for aging research. So maybe that won't matter. Maybe we'll solve it without really understanding it in the first place. That could certainly happen. And then, all these treatments. So yes, there are lots of things that look interesting, but that's also been true for decades. You can go back a while, you've got things like Gerovital and DME, cellular therapy, L-DOPA. I mean, there's so many things, and maybe some of the newest ones actually work. I think one of the interesting things, Bill mentioned senolytics. That's an interesting area that may have some promise. Thymus regeneration, I think, is pretty exciting. I actually did a clinical trial a few years ago for that, which was run by Dr. Gregory Frey, who's also, that's the world's leading cryobiologist, also interested in anti-aging. So we did a trial where basically for 1 year, we took injections of human growth hormone along with metformin and DHEA to prevent the big increase in insulin that usually results from that. And we went to Stanford Medical School, we had MRI scans, and they found that, indeed, as he suspected from research on animals and AIDS patients whose immune system tends to get destroyed, that in fact, the thymus, the cortex part of the thymus, the part that you need to produce T cells that's critical to the immune system, it had indeed regenerated. And so basically, we're resetting the immune system to that of someone who's considerably younger. And what was really interesting about this was, it was a couple of years later, maybe 2 or 3 years later, that Greg was talking to the world's leading researcher on aging clocks, looking at methyl aging clocks, Steve Horvath. And so he gave him our samples, only about a dozen of us in this initial trial, and Horvath ran his test, which basically seems to very strongly correlate with actual aging and remaining life expectancy. And he said that in the last 3 months of the trial, we got more than a year younger. So we ended up actually biologically younger than when we started the trial. Now, because I thought, well, that's interesting, the last 3 months only. So what if we did this for 18 months instead of 12 or maybe 2 years? Would we see an even greater improvement? That's something I would love to try for myself. Maybe I'll find out. So there may be things that do help, but again, we've seen a lot of treatments over the years, so I'm just urging a little bit of caution. I absolutely believe we're going to beat aging. We're going to beat this problem. We're going to do away with the old enemy of death. But when is it going to happen? Let's be a little bit cautious. If you put off making cryonics arrangements because you think aging is going to be fixed in your lifetime, well, first of all, if you're in your 90s, I really don't think that's a good idea. But even if you're in the 40s, if you're in your 30s, you could have a heart attack, you get hit by a car, you get shot. I mean, all kinds of things can happen to you. So don't cryocrastinate. Don't procrastinate on cryonics arrangements. Because things happen. You may get an illness and no longer be insurable. And over 90% of people pay for the cryonics process with life insurance, by the way. You don't have to have a bunch of cash sitting around. You have a life insurance policy that's paid out to the cryonics organization. But if you get something that makes you no longer insurable, well, then you're going to have that money or else you're out of luck. Also, premiums go up with life insurance over time. Rudy Hoffer may be listening into this. I suspect he probably is, and he's a great person to talk to if you want to talk about insurance for cryonics purposes. So that makes it affordable for many people, but the earlier you start, the more affordable those premiums will be. And even with biological immortality, even if we stopped aging completely, so when you're perennially a 30-year-old in terms of physiology, you can still die. There can still be new diseases that we haven't cured yet, accidents, asteroids hitting your head. I mean, all kinds of things that can happen. So, and of course, catastrophic accidents, planes being blown up or exploding, falling off a mountain. If you like extreme sports, there's many possibilities. So don't put off making those arrangements. And I'm going to come back to this in my second sort of mini presentation. Stay healthy. Even if you have cryonics arrangements, that is no excuse for being a slob. No excuse for neglecting your diet, for not doing something about stress, for not getting enough sleep, for not exercising. It's no excuse. Because the longer you live, not only do you have a better chance of reaching longevity escape velocity, but you're also going to be in better condition when you're cryopreserved, and that does matter. If your blood vessels, if your vasculature are in really bad condition, then we may not be able to get the solutions into your brain that are going to prevent ice formation, which is very important. It's not that I think it's hopeless if you don't get protection against ice crystals, but it's going to do a massive amount of damage, and you don't want that. So the better your vascular system, the better for you. And this might sound weird, but if you're going to die of something, try to die of cancer, not heart disease. Why is that? Well, because heart attacks happen pretty suddenly, usually. They can happen anywhere at any time, and that's very bad for the cryonics process. With cancer or ALS, or other horrible things that are gradual degenerative diseases, we have a much better idea of when your body's going to give out on you. I've seen a couple of cases with ALS, for instance, where people went pretty quickly, but I'll take one example. It's a public one, so I can mention the name. Hal Finney, an old friend of mine who was the first person to receive a Bitcoin. Some people actually think he was the creator of Bitcoin, but he denies that. He developed ALS, and he was determined to keep on until he could no longer communicate. He even wrote a computer program to read his eye movements so he could spell out letters gradually. He said, once I can no longer communicate, take me off the ventilator, I'll be ready to go. But he did a very, very sensible thing. He moved from Santa Barbara, California, to his cryonics organization in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we were right there at his bedside when the ventilator was removed. And when he eventually stopped breathing, we could begin the process immediately, no delay, within seconds of legal death being pronounced. So it's, one of those degenerative diseases is better from a cryonics point of view than a heart attack. And you may not have a choice what you get, but actually there are some things you can do that might actually increase one risk and decrease the other. It's a little controversial. Okay, so there are a number of organizations that you can join. Alcohol Life Extension Foundation is the one that I ran for almost 10 years. It's in Arizona. Cryonics Institute in Michigan has also been around a long time. Alcohol's been around for over 50 years, and CI for almost as long. There are new organizations in Europe now, Tomorrow Biostasis, or the non-profit European Biostasis Foundation. So if anybody wants to know more about that, please, actually Neil, you can ask Neil, because Neil certainly is very much plugged into this, and he can tell you how you can get more information. So to me, I'm not sure if there was a slide for that, but I guess there wasn't. So let me, if you want to load the second presentation while I finish this off, Doug, that'd be great. So the way I think about life extension and cryonics is I think of it as like a financial portfolio. When you're doing financial planning, the financial planner will usually tell you, well, what's the first thing you're supposed to do according to a financial planner? What's the first place you want to focus? Well, yeah, but save what for what? Emergency fund, right? They always tell you you should have at least 3 months, preferably 6 months or a year, of funds that you can draw on in an emergency. If something happens, you can't work anymore. You don't want to be stuck, going into debt right away. So emergency fund. So I think of cryonics as basically being your emergency fund. Put that in place first, and you've got that covered, and then you can work on senolytics and supplements and all the other things that might help and all the new stuff coming up. But that's the first thing you need to do. So I'd be happy to take any questions later on about cryonics and how it works. As I said, I'm actually working on a book because there isn't really one book I can recommend. If you do want one piece that's really excellent, there's a blog by a guy called Tim Urban. His blog is called Wait But Why, and he has an excellent piece on cryonics. It's quite long, but it's not book length, and it's extremely well written. And I think Alcohol apparently has more new members out of that one piece than anything else. So if you don't read a whole book, I would recommend the Wait But Why piece by Tim Urban. But eventually, hopefully sometime next year, I will have a book out that explains how cryonics works, tries to make it persuasive, links it to the current science and to future developments, and hopefully get it to be a more accepted idea. Now, Bill pointed out quite rightly that this life extension idea is growing rapidly now. It's expanding all over the place. There are a lot more conferences, there's a lot more press coverage, and it's a lot more positive. The same is true actually of cryonics, although not on quite the same scale. But I'd noticed a huge change in the press coverage over 15 or 20 years. 20 years ago, it was a lot of very negative stories, all these crazy people freezing their brains. Now, the vast majority of it is quite positive. And almost all the interviews I've done, I'm happy I've done them. In fact, Emil, who runs Tomorrow Biostasis in Switzerland, he was asked about that this morning, or was it yesterday? And he said he doesn't regret any of the interviews he's done. Now, that's a big improvement because we got treated pretty badly in the past. So this is an idea whose time has come. And my personal view is we'll look back on the present day from the future and we'll say, what the heck was wrong with these people? They just put people in the ground to be eaten by worms and bacteria, or they put them in a gigantic oven to be incinerated. Are they insane? They could have cryopreserved their loved ones or themselves. I think we'll be absolutely baffled by the way what we do with people when we could have actually preserved them and given them a chance. Okay, so that said, I want to sort of move on to one area I think is often neglected in terms of health and longevity. Now, exercise is frequently mentioned, but in my experience at least, it's usually mentioned in terms of aerobic exercise. And I want to talk a bit more about resistance exercise. You should exercise your brain, but also exercise your body. Strength training is what I'm going to focus on, but flexibility is important too, and stamina. Balance is actually really important and is also connected to resistance exercise. There are so many people who, as they get old, physiologically old, and have bad, lose bone mass, get osteoporosis and lose bone mass, they fall, and when they fall, because their immune system is pretty much gone at that point, a very large percentage of those, it's a scary percentage, get infected, and their immune system is not able to tackle it, and they die. So just falling can kill you if you're not robust in the first place. So strength and balance, which go together, I think are very important to prevent that. So my wife took this picture, it's a little embarrassing, but my wife took this picture a couple of weeks ago when I was making a nice paleo meal, which you see is not all meat. There's a lot of vegetables. Paleo doesn't have to be heavy meat, but it does mean no processed food, try to minimize processed food. It's really more of a framework for a diet than a specific kind of diet. And apparently I was standing in good lighting, she said, stop right there, and took a picture. So, let me take out the notes that I made this afternoon on this. There's some interesting studies that show how important this is. So a little bit about why you should do resistance exercise. People say, well, because it makes you stronger, might look better. But there's a heck of a lot more to it than that. It's very important for bone strength and density, for your muscles and joints. I mean, it's not much fun to live an extra 10 years if you can't barely get out of a chair, if you can't even walk, if you can't take care of yourself. And that's pretty miserable. And I've seen what that's like. My mother just died a week or two ago. And she'd been paralyzed for 7 years and really didn't want to be around in those years. She couldn't move anymore. But before that, she loved to go dancing. So she was in pretty good shape till she had the stroke. But many people are not. Many people are stuck in nursing homes. They can't even go to the bathroom on their own. That's pretty awful. So maintaining muscles and bones and joints is very important. It also, resistance exercise or strength training also reduces the risk of diabetes, colon cancer, osteoporosis. It lowers blood pressure. It helps you to manage your stress and improve your mood. I find that sometimes I think, okay, it's time to go to the gym. Oh, I'm tired. I don't want to go. But I make myself go, and when I've gone, I go, I'm so glad I went. I feel so much better now, and I'm ready to get back and tackle life again. It really is a good boost. So whatever kind of exercise you do, that makes a big difference. So it reduces anxiety and depression. That's very well established. Both resistance exercise and aerobic exercise do that. So it'll reduce your fall risk, as I mentioned. It'll also fend off metabolic syndrome, which is a massive problem in this country, which is really several different things together. So it's a very effective way of fending off metabolic syndrome, controlling insulin levels, and so on. It's very good at preventing diabetes or even reversing diabetes, along with dietary effects. It's also good for people who develop cancer and start wasting away. Think of it, if you start off already really scrawny with no real muscle mass and you don't have much to burn, you're going to start burning your internal organs for fuel. That's not good. So you don't want to carry around a lot of fat because that's metabolically bad for you and has all kinds of bad effects. So if you don't have fat and you don't have muscle, then you don't have much resilience. You can easily get killed in hospital because you can lose 20 or 30 or 40 pounds in hospital pretty easily when you've got something nasty going on. Now, how much exercise should you do? This is the question, right? I probably do more than I definitely do more than the necessary amount of exercise because I enjoy the other effects of it. But you don't need as much as you might think. And to be honest, there isn't great science on this. It's a little bit speculative. But so it's hard to say what the optimal dose of resistance exercise is for longevity purposes. Again, obviously, if strength is what matters, then within certain limits, more the better. Not 6 hours a day, but generally, a couple of hours a day, you could probably still get stronger. But that's not necessarily optimal for life extension. In older people, one study in older people, and it's very important to qualify that because it doesn't necessarily apply to other people necessarily, they found that resistance training meant that the people doing the resistance training compared to the others had less all-cause mortality, lower cardiovascular risk, total cancer and diabetes risk was lower. Now, all-cause mortality is really important to look at because there are treatments out there that can maybe lower one risk factor. They say, well, doing this will lower your risk of dying of cancer or heart disease or something else. But what will it do overall? Does it make any difference to all-cause mortality? If we fix one problem, you might just die of something else fairly soon after. So when you're looking at life extension studies, always look for all-cause mortality and not just death rates from cancer or heart disease or diabetes or something like that. They found that all-cause mortality decreased 30 to 35% in physically active people. That's a lot. Compared to lots of other interventions you could take, 30 to 35% is enormous. It was also pretty clear from the research that if you do aerobic exercise and resistance exercise together, you'll do even better longevity-wise than doing each on its own. So walking, running is great, weightlifting is great, doing both together can take a bit more time, but that's also, that's even better. So how much do you need to do? Well, according to some studies, it could call a meta-analysis, and again, a lot of these studies are observational or epidemiological. They're not really controlled studies, so take them with a little bit of a grain of salt. But it looks like just 30 to 60 minutes per week of resistance exercise will produce pretty much all the benefits. So, I might do that most days, but if you can do 30 to 60 minutes per week, like 3 10-minute workouts, or 3 20-minute workouts at the most, you're getting pretty much all the benefits. It's going to have all those good effects on your blood sugar, on your bones, on your muscles. So it doesn't take a whole lot. So, don't give the excuse, well, I don't have the time, I'm busy. You're too busy to stay alive? No, come on. And you don't have to join a gym necessarily. You can do body weight exercises. You can use bands. I like to take bands when I'm traveling because you can attach them to a door. You can do rowing exercises. You can do presses. You can do a lot of different exercises quite effectively. But it actually doesn't cost anything. You can do body weight exercises. There was a study, I think 2021, by Kamada that showed that older women had the lowest mortality at 82 minutes of resistance exercise per week. Now, again, this is just an observational study, so we can't prove that that's optimal. But again, that's pretty modest, right? You could do that in 2 workouts a week, and that produced all the benefits that you could ask for. Another caution about these studies is they were all on older people, and obviously older people, especially if they haven't exercised for their lifetime, might have some downsides to exercising more than the supposedly optimal numbers because stress is not necessarily a bad thing. Right? We always talk about stress as bad. I think it's kind of unfortunate that we say that. I think it's strain that's bad. Stress is actually good for us in the right doses at the right time. That's what exercise does. It stresses the body and you rebound. As Nietzsche said, whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger. That's the principle. Intermittent fasting kind of works that way too. You're putting stress on your body by restricting calories temporarily. That's a very different effect than if you do it constantly. So really, again, there's really no excuse for not doing it. It's not that difficult. There's plenty of good resources out there on the internet that will even guide you along, apps that will encourage you and clap you on the back when you meet your goals. It doesn't have to be too involved. I think the key to doing well, people often ask me, how do you manage to get so strong? You must be in the gym hours every day. Well, no, partly, frankly, it's good genes. I'm just lucky I had good genes. I've always been fairly strong. But it's a matter of intensity. I see a lot of people at the gym who are just kind of going, listening to music, not really paying attention to the exercise. I'm in there going, so I'm trying to Hulk out. I'm really pushing myself with every set. And if you do that, you don't need to do as much. So maybe the optimal, one thing about these studies is they don't say what kind of exercise they were doing. So were they working really hard for those 30 to 60 minutes a week? Were they counting just the exercise time? They don't even really specify that. Were they counting the rest breaks? I don't know. But obviously, the more intense you work, the less time you need. But don't go full intensity if it's your first time in the gym and you're 70 years old. You're going to break something. So get a good trainer and step up gradually. But I think that people always talk about aerobic exercise. I think resistance exercise not only will have very powerful effects on longevity, make you much more resilient, it also helps you to enjoy your life more. So you're not going to be frail. We don't want more years of extreme frailty. We want to be very healthy. So that's really my message. If you want to know more about cryonics, again, Neil is a great person to ask for contacts. I'd also recommend a blog that I've set up along with Ashwin de Wolf, who runs Biostasis Technologies, which produces a lot of research into cryonics. I don't know how many people read Substack blogs, but this is called biostasis.substack.com. And we cover a lot of the new research that's coming out. A lot of very interesting stuff is going on. Just a few months ago, for instance, the University of Minnesota, they were able to reliably and repeatably cryopreserve rat kidneys so they could actually flush out the fluid from the kidneys, replace it with a cryoprotectant solution that prevents ice formation, take that down to cryogenic temperatures, hold it there, rewarm it, replace the blood, reimplant those kidneys, and they functioned. So anybody who says, oh, it's impossible, ice will form in the cells and blow them up, well, that's obviously not true because they couldn't have done this. And again, the fact that there are millions of people walking around who are cryopreserved embryos also shows, obviously, it can't be that simple. So we know we can cryopreserve eggs and sperm and embryos and corneas and heart valves and many other tissues. And now we're getting to the point where we can reversibly cryopreserve mammalian organs. That's still the cutting edge. And if you think about it, the brain is an organ. So if we can do that to those organs, we should be able to do it to a human brain and eventually a whole body. The main obstacle is reversing the process because you have to rewarm at a very rapid rate and there are other complications. So we're not close to solving that problem yet. But we don't have to be. The beauty of the cryonics idea is, especially if you've got in there healthy, you've done your exercise, you've good vascular system, we get lots of cryoprotectant into the cells, and we preserve you really effectively. The beauty of that is once that's done, we don't have to rush. We can wait for the research to catch up with us because you're not going anywhere, you're not changing, you wait decades if necessary until we can fix the problem. But again, to enjoy your life, to both extend your life and enjoy your extended life, do the exercise. It will also put you in better shape to be cryopreserved. So I'm just giving a strong recommendation. Do that resistance exercise, join the gym, get a few dumbbells at home, get some bands, do body weight exercises, but don't just sit on your fat, lazy butt and get old and die. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for Max? Max will be around this evening if you'd like to talk to him as well. David.
Of course, the question comes to mind, the costs, or the cost.
Cost for cryonics.
Cost for cryopreservation, okay. It really depends on what organization you sign up with and what option you sign up with. At the Alcohol Foundation, well, at Cryonics Institute, you can sign up at a lower rate, but there's also extra costs if you want to get someone to come out to your bedside and take care of all the processes that are really very important. So it may not end up being that much cheaper. So I'll basically give you two prices for the USA. For, I guess it's $220,000 now, so it just went up a bit. Again, usually paid with life insurance. That $220,000 will pay for the entire process, which involves sending a team out to your bedside, a number of different people, including some people sitting right behind you who may be taking care of you. They will do the processes involving removing the blood, replacing it with a solution, either to transport you to another location where the cells will be protected, or to actually do the cryoprotection, where we prevent ice formation, administering the various drugs, doing the transport. And Alcor has transported people from as far as China and Thailand. That's very demanding. And if you want to know more about that, Aaron Drake is the guy who did it, right there at the back. You should talk to him. It's quite an experience. So it covers a lot. And if you look at the cost of major heart surgery or other surgery, it's a lot more than that. So you're getting a tremendous amount. And most of the money that's paid, out of that $220,000, well over half of that money is put into a separate fund, which Alcor calls the Patient Care Trust Fund, which is actually a legally separate body with a separate board of directors. And that money can only be used, it's invested according to a very careful formula, and the income from the investments can only be used to pay for continued cryopreservation and eventual revival. It can't be used for any other purposes in the organization. So it's a very strict division of funds there. So obviously you need to put enough in there that you can draw just a small amount per year above inflation to pay for that, and it should hopefully never run out. So $220,000 for whole body. Some people, including myself, probably about around half the people, choose just to preserve the brain. The idea being that that's where all the important stuff is. This stuff is replaceable, and we're going to do that. We're going to be able to replace tissues and organs and whole bodies eventually. I mean, if you think about it, we got here from one egg, one fertilized egg. Somehow, by the magic of nature, that grew into this multi-trillion-dollar organism. So, but the bit you can't replace is a brain. If you replace my brain with someone else's, it's them, not me. So that's the important part. And for that, it's $80,000, again, for the entire process and perpetual storage. If you think about it, you can store about 10 times as many brains in the same space as a whole body, so the storage costs are a lot lower. So that portion of the expense is quite a lot cheaper. And then there's the membership fees, which is a few hundred a month. So this is not something people living on the street could afford, but my kind of rule of thumb is if you can afford to go to Starbucks every day, you can probably afford cryonics if you make it a priority.
And that's what Martine Rothblatt said on our stage. She said, for the cost of a cup of coffee a day, you're going to be able to afford cryonic suspension and cryonics, signing up for cryonics. I have one question here, and then we're going to go.
How are electromagnetic functions restored?
I presume you're talking about electrical activity in the brain. There's two quite different types of memory. The short-term memory, which is just electrochemical in nature, and if you, for instance, have surgery and you're given general anesthesia, you're going to lose those memories because they haven't been stored in a physical change in the brain yet. It's just electrochemical activity. But after about 20 minutes or 30 minutes or so, new memories will form in the brain in physical structures. The synapses will change, the levels of neurotransmitters in the synapse, the expression of the genes in the synapses will change. And those structures will be physical things that you can basically freeze in place in biostasis. And so just as you can do in surgery, you can restart people. People are clinically dead on the operating table. They've actually had their blood removed. You can have it put back. And once you restart the process, the brain will just restart again. It's like starting an engine. Well, not exactly like that, but it's a little bit like restarting an engine, essentially. As long as you preserve those structures, then the chemical activity should restart, and memory and personality should still be there. And this is not just speculation. Certainly at Alcor and now at Tomorrow Biostasis, we're starting to do, well, we've been doing CT scans for quite a while. CT scans allow us to see how well we have cryoprotected the body, how well we've perfused the body with a solution that prevents ice formation. It doesn't tell us whether the synapses and the neural bodies are intact. For that, you need to do something a bit more sophisticated. You need electron microscopy and some other studies. And there have been a number of those done. One case we're still hoping to be published very soon now was a special case from a longevity, Dr. Stephen Coles, it's a public case. He formed the LAGRG, the Gerontology Research Group, so he's very involved in life extension. And he decided at the last minute he wanted to get cryopreserved, but didn't have the funds for it, and we ended up making a special agreement where he could be a research subject. We could take brain samples from areas where it doesn't really matter, which they do in brain surgery. And from the results that haven't yet been published, but which I know about, everything looks fantastically good. You can't, if you compare a living brain to his brain, you really can't tell the difference. So under good conditions, and I have to specify that because it's not always good conditions, you can't always guarantee that you're there in a timely manner, but under good conditions, I think we have very strong scientific evidence that the structures that encode memory and personality are intact. And we just need to wait for a time when we can reverse the process and the aging process along with it. Obviously, you don't want to bring people back at 90 years old just to die again, so we have to beat the aging problem before we bring people back. Now, there might be an exception with people who get cancer in their 20s or 30s. Maybe we could bring them back before we solve the aging problem.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Max Moore.
I will be here if anybody has further questions.
Max will be here with us, and I'd like to let you know that next month, it'll be December 14th, we will be having the Remembrance of the Resurrectables ceremony. I hope that you can come here. We have Aaron Drake who will be speaking at that. And now tonight we have a Thanksgiving-themed feast, a banquet for you, so I hope you'll be able to partake. We have turkey and chicken and salmon and vegan options, so please join us for dinner in honor of our speakers, Bill and Max. Thank you for coming, and be sure to get the recording so you can share it with your friends and family.
Let's build a better world for every boy and girl, every woman and man, take them by the hand, and let's build a better world. We are one big family, and we are the human race, on a big and beautiful planet, spinning through outer space. Let's build a better world for every boy and girl, every woman and man, take them by the hand, and let's build a better world. Everyone has value, and we all need love and respect. This helps to build a better world as we reach out to connect. Let's build a better world for every boy and girl, every woman and man, take them by the hand. Let's build a better world. Do unto each other, it's the wise and golden rule. You're my sister, you're my brother, and life is one big school. Let's build a better world for every boy and girl, every woman and man, and take them by the hand. Let's build a better world. Every woman and man, take them by the hand, and let's build a better world. Let's build a better world. and don't want to smile. If it takes just a little while, open your eyes and look at the day. You'll see things in a different way. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Don't stop, it'll soon be here. It'll be better than before. Yesterday's gone, yesterday's gone. Why not think about times to come, not about the things you have done? If your life was bad to you, just think what tomorrow will do. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Don't stop, it'll soon be here. It'll be better than before. Yesterday's gone, yesterday's gone. Oh, here's our dance break. All I want is to see you smile. If it takes just a little while. I know you don't believe that it's true. I never meant any harm to you. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Don't stop, it'll soon be here. It'll be better than before. Yesterday's gone, yesterday's gone. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Don't stop, it'll soon be here. It'll be better than before. Yesterday's gone, yesterday's gone.